Skimmed it, okay.
No, I read it like, but not like fully, Page like 30.
See, already making excuses. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a bit about this section here. So, we're going to be talking about the profession of radiologic technology, right? This is going to be your textbook, and then of course, to make sure you have a laptop or something to take notes with. Right? Laptop is also needed for your exams. To make sure you have pens and note cards as well. Bless you. Speaking of which, has everyone been able to finish their note card assignment? Yes. All right. All right. So as far as our introduction, okay, this unit is divided into 4 chapters. So for this first chapter, we're going to take a look at an overview of the imaging sciences. Because in imaging, we don't just have X-ray. So we use many forms of energy here in medicine. These different energies can be used to create images, or we can use these images to measure physiological functions. So we can take a look at the anatomy of the patient, or we can take a look at the physiology of the patient. There are many medical professions focused on these various specialties. You see some of them up here in the image to the right. MRI, ultrasound, X-rays, CT, PET, mammo. These are just some examples of the different imaging modalities which are out there. Of course, for us, our focus is on X-ray. So, with X-rays, we are dealing with radiation. So we do need to know what we are referring to when we say radiation. Radiation deals with energy. Energy is the capacity, the ability to perform work on an object. So energy is the ability to perform work on an object, right? You can have potential energy, you can have kinetic energy, but we're just talking about, can you do work? Radiation, then, is a specific type of energy. This is energy transmitted as waves or particles through space or through a medium. Okay. So, radiation is energy transmitted through waves or particles. And this is going to travel through something. It can travel through a medium like air, or it can travel through empty space, through a vacuum. Radiation is not inherently dangerous. So just because energy is radiation does not make it dangerous. Can anyone come up with any examples of radiation? Yes, Jay.
Ultraviolet or visible light radiation.
Okay, light. So you have visible light or you have UV light. Very good. Like at tanning beds, right? Use UV. Any other types of radiation? Okay, radiation from the sun. What kind of radiation comes from the sun? All right, solar. You have cosmic radiation. Yes. Along with visible light, along with UV.
I don't know if this is right, but someone told me that there's radiation from a microwave.
Microwaves are radiation, yes.
Electromagnetic?
Electromagnetic, yes, that is a whole category of radiation. Very good. Any other kinds of radiation?
IV therapy?
IV therapy?
Radiation therapy?
Nuclear medicine,
Like-
yes, nuclear medicine or radiation therapy.
Like chemo?
Chemo, not so much. Chemo deals with more chemical compounds. Okay. What about sound? Does sound count as radiation?
Yeah.
Okay, so our friends over in ultrasound sonography, right? They're dealing with sound waves, right?
So you have radiation from sound waves?
So sound waves is particulate radiation. Right? They travel as waves through the air. So, right, there we go. We have electromagnetic, we have sound, we have particulate. So, there are all sorts of radiation, right? Of those we mentioned, not all of them are dangerous. Light is not inherently dangerous, unless you shine it in someone's eyes. Sound is not inherently dangerous unless,
Too loud.
it's really, really loud. Radio waves, right? Radio waves aren't dangerous. Radio waves are all around us. They're how cell phones and radios operate. But when we're dealing with X-rays, we are dealing with dangerous radiation. So to separate them, we have non-ionizing and ionizing electromagnetic radiation. So non-ionizing is low energy radiation, light, radio waves, heat, infrared. Ionizing, those are your high energy types of radiation, X-rays and gamma rays. Okay, and like we said, you can have sound or you can have particles as radiation as well.
So
Yes?
anything that travels in a wave is a radiation.
Mhm.
Is that
So,
is that what you are you picking out everything that travels in a wave as a radiation, sir?
right, so if we transfer energy by transferring it in the form of a wave or transferring it in the form of like a wave particles, right? And they travel through a medium. They can travel through the air, they can travel through water, they can travel through a vacuum. Then yes, that is radiation. See, but normally, like when people think of radiation, we're thinking more along the lines of electromagnetic radiation, right? Traveling as waves or as photons, particles of energy that can go through a vacuum. So, speaking of the electromagnetic energy, here we have the electromagnetic spectrum. So, we'll talk more about this later, but right now, right, you have some properties of your energy. You have things like wavelength, things like frequency, and those determine the energy of what you're looking at. So over here, we have X-rays, right? And so X-rays are on the high end of the spectrum. So they are considered to be ionizing, and it is the ionizing radiation which is most dangerous. Ionizing radiation can cause chemical reactions to happen in the body which are undesirable. It can mess with your DNA, or it can create toxic chemical compounds. Okay, let's talk about the history of medicine. So medicine, in the form that we know it, has been practiced for over 5,000 years. Starting with Hippocrates, considered the father of Western medicine. Right? He is Hippocrates, he is not Hippocrates, as much as you might think he is. Scientific. Thank you, I'm glad you enjoyed the joke. From there, in the 17th century, we began to apply the scientific method to medicine. So observation, hypothesis, theory, experimentation. A few important names throughout the history of medicine. We have Edward Jenner, who introduced the concept of vaccination. He was the one who first developed a vaccine to smallpox, using the less deadly variant, cowpox. We have Louis Pasteur, who discovered the role of germs in the disease process. Also, the gentleman who the process of pasteurization is named after, making your milk safer to drink. And then the human genetic code, DNA, was discovered in the mid-20th century through contributions by Watson, Crick, and Franklin. X-rays, on the other hand, were discovered by a German physicist. But notice that he wasn't even a doctor. He was a physicist named Wilhelm Röntgen. So this happened November 8th in 1895. So over 100 years ago. And what happened was he was working in his lab. He was exploring the properties of something called a Crookes tube or a cathode tube. And there were these invisible particles coming off this cathode tube that were causing spots on a film. He did not know what these were. Later on, we would find out that they were electrons. But he was trying to explore the properties of these unknown electrons. And instead, what happened was that he found that there was a fluorescent screen, a piece of fluorescent cardboard near his workstation that would glow anytime he turned on this cathode tube. And so he began to experiment with this to try and figure out exactly what was causing the glow. He decided that it was an unknown ray. It was a ray, a beam of energy of unknown origin. For unknowns, he used the letter X to denote unknown. We kept that X, and now we have X-ray. And so, through his experiments, he discovered almost all the currently known properties of X-rays that we have today. For his discovery, he won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1901. From this discovery, he had the idea that perhaps he could use these penetrating unknown rays to look inside the body. And so the very first X-ray we have, the very first radiograph, is of his wife's hand, wedding band included. So that is the hand of Mrs. Röntgen. Yes.
So, given that they didn't really know pretty much anything about the field, did they end up suffering some like illnesses or anything like that? Is there any like history of something like that, or?
Yes, very much so. So we will get to talk about this later on, but a lot of the early X-ray pioneers did end up suffering cancer or radiation burns, which ended up having to be amputated. Yes.
Didn't his wife die?
When did his wife die?
No, didn't she die?
Because of this, that I do not know.
No, that wasn't his sister.
They probably took a lot more pictures of just this one.
Maybe.
As far as in America, the first recorded, I think one of the first recorded deaths, one of the most well-known ones as well, is of a gentleman called Clarence Daly. And he was one of the assistants to Thomas Edison, who among his various contributions was working with X-rays, specifically the fluoroscope, which is what we use now in fluoroscopy. Okay. So yes, when his assistant died, Edison swore off studying X-rays at that point. But others did continue their work, and eventually we discovered ways to make things safer and safer. Although you may be surprised as to how late into its lifespan we continue to use X-rays for relatively simple things. But look forward to that next semester. Okay, as far as a career field, you have many options. Right? Radiography is what we are doing right now. But once you finish, you have options for magnetic resonance imaging, computed tomography, cardiovascular interventional technology, medical sonography, nuclear medicine, radiation therapy, radiology assistant, bone densitometry, mammography, a very popular one. Education, what I'm doing right now. Administration, managers, directors, and even commercial firms. You could be the person who's working with the vendors, selling the equipment instead. Okay? So all sorts of career opportunities do stem from this field. So let's discuss a couple of them. Radiography. This uses ionizing electromagnetic radiation in the form of X-rays to create medical images. This energy is used to create medical images, but can also cause harm to living tissue, like we mentioned previously. So competent radiography, and of course we all want to be competent, this requires the safe use of X-rays. Remember, you're not a radiologic technician, you are a radiologic technologist. Okay. Bone densitometry. If you rotate through LBJ during your clinical rotations, you may see bone densitometry. This is used to diagnose osteoporosis, right? A loss of bone mass. So, regular X-rays, we can see fractures. We can see when the bone breaks. But regular X-rays are not very good at telling what the quality of the bone is. Is the bone in a healthy state or not? So instead, we have bone densitometry. It uses dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, also known as DEXA, to measure the, lower spine, not power spine, but to measure the lower spine and hips. Okay, and there is post-primary certification in bone densitometry. We have cardiovascular interventional technology, CVIT. So in this case, we're using X-rays to visualize the cardiovascular system, dealing with the blood vessels, okay, and the heart. This requires the use of a catheter and the injection of iodinated contrast media. So it's a type of medicine that lights up the vessels in the body. So it's easier to visualize those vessels. This is a procedure performed in a sterile angiography lab. So not quite to the level of surgery, but this is a procedural modality. Okay. Another term for this is special procedures, or just specials. Okay, we have diagnostic medical sonography. We're moving away from that ionizing radiation. Instead, here we have high frequency sound energy used to create medical images. It is non-ionizing, so it is not as harmful to the human body. Is it harmless? That we do not know. We've done studies. Studies have shown no conclusive evidence of long-term effects, but sonography is still a relatively new field. But because of its perceived safety, it does have a wide variety of medical applications. You can use this for imaging pregnant patients, where you would not be able to with X-ray. CT, computed tomography, or if you talk to someone a bit older, they might call it CAT scan, computed aided tomography. Okay. So this uses X-ray energy, but it combines it with some really sophisticated software to create what are known as cross-sectional images of the human body. So instead of looking at the whole body at one time, or all the anatomy in an area at one time, like with X-ray, you get to look at slices, small pieces of the patient at one time. This allows for more detail. It requires hundreds of views of the patient anatomy as the X-ray tube and the CT detector rotate around the patient. So the patient is sitting on the bed, they go through the mini donut. Inside the donut, you have a tube spinning around, and those pictures that it takes as it spins are all reconstructed through software to create your final images. Okay. MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. This one is a personal favorite of mine because I do also teach the MRI program here at Harris Health. Instead of ionizing radiation, we make use of magnetic fields. These magnetic fields are varied. We have the main magnetic field, we have radio frequency fields, we have radiant magnetic fields. But they all combine together, they work together to create images of the human body. Once again, just like with ultrasound, this is non-ionizing. So there are no long-term side effects that have been connected to the use of MRI. However, there are potential short-term side effects, and there are different dangers in MRI compared to X-ray. For example, because it does use a magnetic field, if you have something which is iron or steel, that magnet will suck it in. So we do need to be very careful not to bring anything metal near the scanner. Nuclear medicine uses nuclear energy from the atom to create medical images. This energy takes the form of gamma radiation. So, what kind of atoms do we use? We use radioactive isotopes. So something like technetium, and it gives off radioactive energy while inside the patient. And then we can detect that energy as it comes out. So radiopharmaceuticals, drugs which are radioactive, are administered to patients to assess physiologic functioning. Under nuclear medicine, we have a variety of things, including PET, positron emission tomography. And then we have radiation therapy. Unlike the previous topics we covered, radiation therapy is not used for diagnosis. Instead, it is used for treatment. So radiation is not only used to create images for diagnosis, but it can be used to treat certain diseases as well. In this case, cancer, malignant tumors. So we're using very high energy radiation to help destroy these tumors. These radiation therapists work with other members of the oncology team to improve the quality of life for cancer patients. So this falls under radiation oncology or medical oncology. And from radiation therapy, could even go a step further and look into dosimetry, the person who plans the radiation therapy treatments. All right, so any questions? Yes.
Ms. Shepherd was talking about like tattoos.
Yes.
How you have them in your eye.
Mm.
Certain ones.
Yes.
How does that work?
All right, great question. So, what happens is that in some of the older tattoos, they do have iron in them, so like iron filings inside the tattoo. Now, if someone with a tattoo walks into the MRI room, will the magnet rip those iron filings out of them like Magneto from X-Men? No, that's not going to happen. It's not that crazy. But, so if you are a tech, it is okay to have tattoos and work in the MRI department. There are no real side effects of doing so. The danger comes from being a patient with those types of tattoos, because part of the process of the MRI scan requires changing magnetic fields. It requires input of energy into the patient. And iron, when it receives that energy, will begin to heat up. So the danger for patients isn't actually the movement of the iron inside the tattoos. It is actually the heating of those tiny particles inside the tattoo. They can potentially cause burns to the patient, like tattoo burns to the patient, where that area of the skin just heats up by a lot during the process of the scan.
So,
Yes.
Then it must be bothering the metal in the teeth as well.
Metal in the teeth, that could be a potential concern as well. Mhm. So anytime you do put metal into the MRI environment, concerns are with heating, with movement, and with electrical conduction. So it's not just metal flying into the scanner that we're worried about. For patients, we are also worried about heating and electrical conduction. So yes, if you do have any metal, make sure that as a patient, let your technologist know so that they can double check, verify that it is okay for you to go through with an MRI scan. They should give you some sort of questionnaire to fill out, asking if you have any of these potential metal hazards. Like, do you have metal filings? Have you ever been shot by a bullet? Did you ever work with sheet metal? Do you have a pacemaker? Things like that. And of course, if you don't see something on the questionnaire, but you still feel like it might be a concern, definitely bring it up to the MRI technologist. They are trained to have the information or know where to find information about those sorts of implants to verify whether or not it is safe for you to go into the machine. Any other questions? Yes?
Are MRIs safe for babies or?
Yes, so there have been no recorded negative effects of MRIs on babies. However, still, because MRI is a relatively young field, out of an abundance of caution, most facilities will voluntarily choose to wait until after the first trimester to scan a pregnant patient. Great. Any other questions? Are we good so far?
Yeah, yes, sir.
No one's falling asleep yet? Awesome. Let's keep going. Section 2. Professional organizations. So, organizations perform 3 functions. We have accrediting agencies, certification bodies, and professional societies. Different organizations may handle different functions. For example, accreditation is done through the JRC. Certification is done through the ARDMS, ARRT, and NMTCB. And then there are many professional societies, including the ASRT and TSRT. And some of these may look familiar because we did mention them during Intro to Rad Pro as well. These are used to help ensure quality. So accreditation, certification, licensure, professional organizations, why do they exist? They're not roadblocks just to slow you down. They're there to make sure that you are of a minimum quality before you can go into the patient setting. So, accreditation is used to judge schools. It is used to set standards for schools such as this one. So, we have the Joint Review Committee, the JRC, and they determine what the minimum requirement is to be an accredited school. So the school must meet a minimum level of quality to become accredited. If you instead join an unaccredited program, then you have no guarantees as to what kind of education you will get. So always check for accreditation, right? Not just for radiography, but for when you go out and look for future post-primary job or educational advancement, look for accreditation. Okay, so the JRC is sponsored by organizations, and they have to approve a document that details the minimum requirements for the operation of an accredited program. So we need like a certain number of texts per student. We need a certain number of teachers per student. We need a certain number of clinical rotations for the students, things like that. So we're not allowed to take 10 of you and put you all into a single clinic which only has 1 X-ray room. right, that is against the standards. So you can see what these accreditation standards are here on the website. So for us specifically, it is going to be the JRC ERT, JCERT, Joint Review Committee on Education in Radiologic Technology. So they're the ones that do accreditation for radiography, radiation therapy, medical dosimetry, and MRI. And here are some of their sponsors. And so these organizations help contribute to the JCERT. You have ACR, American College of Radiology, ASRT, American Society of Radiologic Technologists, AEIRS. This is actually where Mr. Donahue and Mr. Norsworthy have gone this week for the AEIRS conference, Association of Educators in Imaging and Radiologic Sciences. And then AHRA, American Healthcare Radiology Administrators. Okay. Moving on from accreditation, we have certification. Certification is now for individuals rather than the school. So this is a process through which an agency grants recognition to an individual, right, one of you, upon demonstration of skills through examination, right? So for example, the registry at the end of these 2 years. Speaking of which, a registry is a list of individuals holding a particular certification. So the registry we are concerned with is the ARRT, American Registry of Radiologic Technologists. This was founded in 1922. The ACR and ASRT became co-sponsors in 1944. And their job is to elevate the standards of radiologic technology through voluntary certification by examination. Yes, voluntary certification. You do not need to take the exam after you graduate this program in 2 years. But if you want a job, then you do. Right? Because even though it's a voluntary examination, organizations, hospitals, clinics have decided that they only want to hire people that have gone through this examination. Does that make sense? Okay. And they published a list of registrants. So you can look up to see if someone is actually registered as a tech or not. For example, if you do not trust that I am actually an X-ray tech, you can go onto the ARRT website, type in my name, and I will show up with my licenses.
So that's your receipt?
What is that?
That's your receipt? That's your proof for us?
That's my proof, yes.
Nice, nice.
So in 2 years, after you take the exam, right, your names will show up here as well. That is how people can, or organizations can look up to make sure you are actually certified. Now, if you look here, you may notice that I have these credentials. I have a bunch of letters after my name. What do these letters mean? Well, here you go. RT stands for Registered Technologist. It doesn't say what you're registered in. It just says that you are registered. It's the stuff that comes afterward which gives the details. If you are RTBD, you are registered in bone densitometry. BS, breast sonography. CI, cardiac interventional radiology. CV, cardiovascular interventional radiology. CT, computed tomography. MR, magnetic resonance imaging. Just M by itself, you're registered in mammography. N, nuclear medicine. QM, quality management. T, radiation therapy. R, by itself, radiography. Which means once you finish this program and you take your exam, you will be RTR, registered in radiography. RRA, registered radiology assistant. S, sonography. VI, vascular IR. And VS, vascular sonography. Right? So there's a whole bunch of different credentials that you can attain.
So for each one of them, it goes RTM, the registered technologist for mammography.
Okay, well, let's take a look here. How is mine set up?
I see.
We have RT at the front, so I'm a registered technologist. R for radiology, MR for magnetic resonance imaging, and then ARRT, the one who gave me these credentials.
RT always comes with the dots.
Yes, it should come with the dots. So this is one way this is how you should list your credentials. Okay, you have your full name first, and then comma R.T. If you're also a radiologist, if you're an RT, right, you put that in front as well. List credentials inside the parentheses in order they were earned. Right, so if I went and got my CT license, I would now be RMRCT. Someone that did it the opposite way would be RCTMR. Right? It's in the order in which you gained your licenses. And then add ARRT at the end to show where the certification came from. Don't add extra periods, don't add any spaces. So this is how your professional name should appear. Now, we also have state licensing agencies because some states require a specific state license in addition to your national certification. So the laws will vary between state to state. It is your responsibility to check with your state to figure out which ones require a state license, which ones do not require a state license. For example, in Texas, you are required to have a state license along with your ARRT certification. So, for me, I am licensed with the Texas Medical Board, the TMB. And so, when you guys all get close to graduation, we will also get you registered with the TMB in preparation for you going into the workforce.
So the TMB is considered more governmental, less on the sponsoring organization, or the license, or the joint review committee?
Correct.
They're their own entity.
Correct.
Okay.
So basically, I graduate, I take my exam with the ARRT, I am now a radiologic technologist. I can now practice. But some states require me to register with the state in order to practice there. So in Texas, even if I have my ART, I cannot practice until I've also signed up for my TMB, right? Which of course is another fee on top of being fingerprinted and stuff.
You said fee, like?
Yes, as in,
Love
that's
that.
right.
But no exam, right, sir?
No exam, no additional exam. It's just you need to pay to be licensed in the state.
Just, okay.
But look, if you want, like, look at it this way. It does keep people from, okay, so nothing against people from Louisiana, nothing against people from Oklahoma or Arizona, right? But it keeps them from, crossing borders and taking your jobs, right?
But
But
They
then
just
for the
have to-
people from Texas also have to do this, sir.
So it all depends on the state.
Or
Right?
like-
So Texas says that you have to live in Texas, you have to be licensed in Texas in order to
So-
work as a
But if
rad
if I'm from Texas, I'll be paying that fee as well, right? sir?
tech. Yes, correct.
How much is the fee for the test?
That's a good question. How much was it? 80 something?
I think 80 something. Oh, okay.
I thought you meant like thousands.
No.
Ah.
So each year you have to pay them like 80 something and
Each
each year.
Oh, you don't
Don't please
They're
set
stealing
aside
your money.
Please set aside a small portion of your paycheck to make sure you
But
can
I
keep
was
earning that
asking,
money.
so you can keep like this.
income tax.
Yes,
That's what I'm
check
saying.
for
Like,
this.
we're-
Yeah,
we're-
same thing,
Income tax.
before you get managed at TMB, the same thing applies to the ARRT as well.
Oh.
I'm paying to both Texas and the ARRT to be able to practice X-ray.
Man, they're just a
How
middleman.
much is ART 2 years, ain't it?
ART 70, 75 or something?
But it's
A
every
year?
2 years, right?
A year.
It's a year?
You need
Correct.
to renew your license every 2 years, right?
So you renew it every year, but you need your continuing education every 2 years.
For the ART?
For
Or
the ART.
So for renewing, you just have to pay. You don't have to do
Every
any.
year. Oh,
All right,
Lord.
you have to renew it every year.
And you don't have to study or do anything for that. Just pay. So.
We will
And
talk
then-
about that. So, maintaining your credentials. Yes.
What about a travel check? Like, would you have to do that too for every state that you go to?
That is actually a great question. I do not know the answer to that question.
Sounds like expenses.
That would-
company like
that would
reimburse me.
Yes, that would definitely be something to research before going on that route. Great question, though. Perhaps your organization works something up in the States. I'm not sure. Okay, so, like I just said, individuals must pay an annual fee to maintain active status with the ART. In addition, you must adhere to their code of ethics. Right? If you do not follow their code of ethics, then you may have your license revoked. In addition, you must document 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years. That is called your biennium. And that starts on your birthday. So, or your birth month, I should say. So, you have 2 years to get 24 continuing education credits. Additional certifications do not increase the number of continuing education hours required. So, if I only have radiography, I need to do 24 hours. If I have radiography and MRI, that does not mean I have to do 48 hours now. That would make me very sad if that was true. I would still only do my 24 hours and count towards both of them. Okay. If I had CT as well, still only 24 hours. Okay. So additional certifications do not increase your educational load. Yes?
If you have multiple certifications, do you get to pick how you distribute the 24 hours, or it's like
It just counts for all of them.
oh,
Now, continuing education, this is not an exam, right? It's just you attend a lecture or a seminar, or you do some work online, and then those credits go towards your biennium. And of course, make sure you do keep records of it. In case they do audit you, you need to be able to send documentation that you did those credits and that you didn't just put some names on here.
So you can't just say like, oh yeah, I learn something new every day, like
Correct.
to the
You
point
cannot
of
do that.
24. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Wrong trial.
You can't be like, yeah, I watched Scrubs, that counts as CV, right?
The good doctor, right? Yeah.
Doesn't work. However, you do have something called continuing qualification requirements. So this was put in, I think, 2010, 2011. When I graduated, I was part of the first class that fell into this.
Oh, no.
CQRs are a way to make sure that you as a tech actually still remember what you did in school after you've been in the workforce for a while. Because a common thing you will hear from techs is you'll ask them a question about what you're doing here in class. And they'll say, oh, you know, I don't remember that. I don't know that anymore. Right? They may not need all of that detailed information that you are learning here, because during their time while working, they're more of the mindset, oh, well, you know, as long as I put the sensor around here and have the light open, the doctors can figure out the rest. Okay? Not the best mindset to have, but you do see it. So, in order to make sure that you still remember your material, we have the CQR. Every 10 years, you need to go back and take an exam again, which is basically a mini registry. So, when you graduate from this program, you will go out and you will take a 230 question exam called a registry in order to get your license. 10 years from then, you have to go back, take another 100 question exam, which is basically a mini registry. Now, what happens if you fail that exam? Do you lose your license? Are you kicked out into the cold and snow?
Fired.
Are you going to be fired from your job?
No.
No. Okay. So I'll put you at ease right now. No, you will not be fired for not performing well on the CQR. Instead, what will happen is they will prescribe specific continuing education that you must do to cover the areas you were weak in. So, if
That equals more than.
So,
Yep.
so this CQR is actually free.
The first time.
The exam is free. So they will not charge you to go in every 10 years, as long as you keep your appointment. You miss your appointment, then yes, you have to pay. So make sure you show up when you're supposed to. But the exam is free. The continuing education, of course, you do need to make sure to get the correct credits at that point. So if they say, all right, you did great on your positioning, you did great on your principles, your physics, but you need help on radiation safety. I need you to do 5 credits of radiation safety in this next biennial. Right? Then you would need to find 5 credits in radiation safety for them. Okay? So it's just a way to make sure that you are studying the areas you are weak in. Okay. So, that's right, 2011, that's when it went into effect. Okay.
Does that go on till you retire?
That goes on until you retire, or as long as you want to keep your license.
But do they contact you when it's time, or like you have to remember?
Yes, so every year when you do your renewal, once you get close to that 10 years, you will get a warning when you renew that says, hey, by the way, your thing is coming up in 2 years. You may want to begin, we've got one right over there. Where it started
I
popping up.
take mine in August.
August, very nice. Okay. So yes, they'll pop up and they say, okay, by the way, you might want to start registering for that exam now.
So,
Yes.
do they include things, because with the continuing education, there must be new things coming up, so they must be including new stuff as well in this RRT, in this
Mhm.
exam, so that we have 100 questions.
Yes, that is correct. So back when I took the exam, they were asking questions about the chemicals used to process your films. When I went for my CQR last year, they asked me questions about digital X-ray detectors. Luckily, I was a teacher, so I had just reviewed the material, right? But if I was a tech, I would be completely lost, and then they'd be like, hey, you should update your knowledge. Do some continuing education regarding digital detectors. Right?
Makes sense.
That way, you stay up to date with what is going on. Because it's easy for me to do continuing education on just positioning or procedures or radiation safety and ignore all the new advancements, right? And then that would be my weak point. So that's what the CQR is meant to address. All right, any other questions? Yes,
So, if we fail the thing, and do they give us like where to find the class or to where we can go to get the credit, or do we have to find our own?
Yes, they will. So they will give you a recommended list of approved credits or approved courses you can use to earn those credits. And those credits will count towards your biennial, towards your 24 credits in that biennial. You don't need to do those in addition
Oh, I
to
see.
your 24, they count towards it.
So it's better to fail.
Right? So there's no harm in failing the CQR. There is harm in failing your registry. Because you have just finished your 2 years of education, you should have that material fresh in your minds. Right? And hopefully, you will remember this material so well that even 10 years from now, it will still be hidden somewhere. Right? That is our goal. Any other questions?
So that joint review committee or whatever was truly established 100 years ago?
Yes.
Like, that's ridiculous. It was 1922.
Yes,
Yeah.
100 years ago to the day, or not day, but to the year. Okay, so let's talk about something that's slightly away from radiology.
Now we're already into chapter 3, sir.
Let's talk about your lifestyle. That's right, we're already in chapter 3. Move fast.
Class is next Friday.
So let's talk about stress. Okay, because as a student, you will deal with a lot of stress. You'll be stressed from schoolwork, stressed from tests, stressed from clinicals, but you'll also find stress at home, right? You'll have interpersonal stress, stress when dealing with your family, stress when dealing with maybe work outside of class. Okay, and so it's important that you have a healthy way to handle stress. Positive attitudes, negative attitudes, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. You want things to go in a positive direction, so you want to try and maintain a positive attitude whenever possible. So what should you do? You should study early, you should study consistently, because nothing is more stressful than getting to Thursday and then thinking, oh, I have a test this Friday, don't I? I really need to study. Time to do an 8-hour cram session with a lot of coffee, stay up until 5 in the morning, and then drive to school. Right? That is not healthy. That is very stressful. You will not learn. You will not do well. Okay, so stress. Produced by events that are perceived to place demands on time, energy, or resources. When you become stressed, your body goes into fight or flight mode. Your body wakes up, it activates, and it's like, all right, what do I need to do? Where's the enemy? How do I combat this? Or do I just run away? Okay. The more often you stress your body, the more of an effect it will have. So you can put your body into a permanent state of alertness like this, which is not healthy. You need time to cool down. So, recommendations for you. If there are any negative changes, right, that are going to cause stress, try and balance them out with planned positive changes. Do something, change something in a positive direction. Use positive in-control language rather than out-of-control language. We'll talk about what that means in one of the next slides. Reassess your worries. Okay? Discard those worries which you have no control over. So, if we look at this little picture here, right? Today, I will not stress over things I cannot control. For example, a very common stress for students. You take the exam, you finish your exam, but you do not have your grades yet. And so, one time this happened on a Friday, right? Students took an exam on a Friday, and I did not give them their grades back until Monday. What do I hear on Monday? Mr. Phung, I was so stressed out over the weekend because I don't know how I did on your exam. At that point, you've already taken the exam, correct? Mm-hmm. At that point, there's nothing you can do to change your grade, correct? Mm-hmm. At that point, the result is what it is, whether you know it or you don't, correct?
Yep.
So there is no point stressing out about it anymore. Whatever happened has happened. At that point, only worry about the future. Do not stress about the past because you can't control that anymore. Right? You can't control what grade I put in, because the exam has already been finished. Right? So try to apply this in a variety of situations, right? Take a look at what is stressing you out and think to yourself, do I actually need to stress about this? Is this something I'm stressing about because I feel like I can actually change something about it? Or am I just stressing out about it, but I can have no effect on it? If I can't affect it, why am I stressing out about it? Right? If I can't change anything about it, why am I stressing out? Let me conserve my energy, put it towards a useful thing. I'll only stress about things that I can change, or try and let things go which I cannot change. And then practice making decisive decisions and properly managing your time. So, specific types of stresses. We have hassles, right? And then we can combat these with uplifts. Hassles are minor, unexpected, negative changes or events. So, let's say I suddenly change the date of the exam. I suddenly decide to push the exam forwards by one day. Oh no, I'm stressed out now, right? Or let's say that there's a family argument, and then I come to class the next day. Oh man, I'm so stressed about that fight I had with my sister. Or I'm so stressed about that fight I had with my kids or my parents, right? Or let's say that I had car trouble. Like, oh man, my car just wasn't starting this morning. I have to get a ride to school. I'm so stressed out now. Right? So those are hassles, minor, unexpected changes. So try and combat these with uplifts, ways to de-stress yourself. So all right, I'm going to try and let go of some of this stress by watching a TV program for 1 hour. Right? My favorite TV show, let me just watch this for 1 hour. Right? Setting a schedule for myself. I'm going to take a walk. Right? Physical exercise is a great way to get rid of stress. I'm going to relax with a hobby. Okay? Once again, do all of this in moderation. Don't spend the next 6 hours on your hobby, right? But spend enough time to where you can start to get rid of some of that stress. Okay, out of control versus in control language. Out of control language uses words like I have to, I must, it's unfair, right? I have to study, I must pass this test. It's unfair that the test is taking place on the same day as the second test. Right? That's out of control language. You're trying to put things outside your control. Right? Things that you cannot affect, right? Because you must, you have to, it's unfair. Right? Try and instead use in control language. Like, I have decided to study. I choose to look over this material, right? I want to review this or that. Right? So, in control language reduces that stress response, it reduces that flight or fight response. Okay? And then, like I mentioned earlier, reassess your worries. Many times we worry about things we have no control over. Many times the things we worry about just don't happen. Right? Unchecked worries lead to procrastination. And I'll be honest, I struggle with this myself. Right? I worry about, oh no, if I do this, then maybe that will happen, and then this will happen, and then what if that goes wrong? Right? But I need to force myself to think, is the stuff I'm worrying about actually going to happen? Oh no, if I try and talk to my students about this, maybe they'll all hate me. Well, is that actually going to happen, or am I just freaking myself out for no reason, right? Or maybe, could this even turn out better than I expect? Will taking action change the outcome? Is there something I can do to get rid of this worry? Do I actually need to concern myself about this worry? Or is this something out of my control that I shouldn't bother with? Right? Do I have control over this outcome? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? Well, I must do this at this exact time, or else my entire schedule is going to go completely wrong, right? Is it actually that big of a deal, or are you just making something bigger than it really is? But to try and put your worries into perspective. Oftentimes you'll find out that there are things you actually don't need to stress about, or they're much smaller stresses than you initially imagined. Practice good time management. Give yourself a schedule. Know how much time you want to give to each task. For example, when you study, don't just say, I'm going to study until I get tired. Give yourself a certain block. Say, I'm going to schedule this for 1 hour, and then I'm going to take a break. Don't set unrealistic expectations, because what happens is you set an unrealistic expectation, you don't meet it, and now you feel bad, and you begin stressing about it. Oh no, I didn't meet the standard I set for myself. Right? So set realistic expectations for yourself, right? And determine specific amounts of time you want to devote to each task. Do not worry about making perfect decisions. Remember, perfect is the enemy of good. A good decision is good enough. Right? You don't need a decision to be perfect. Okay? If you need to make a decision, be decisive. Something I also struggle with. I go to a restaurant. The restaurant has more than one menu item. Oh my gosh, how am I supposed to decide what I want for dinner if there's more than one item on this menu? The chicken looks good, but there's 5 different types of chicken. The beef looks good, but there's 8 different types of beef. Like, half of these are spicy, and I love spicy. How am I supposed to decide what I want to get, right? It's actually not that big of a decision. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can come back to the restaurant another day and get the other item if I didn't like the first one, right? So, it's okay. You don't need to make a perfect decision, just make a good decision. For studying, same thing. You don't need to make perfect decisions. But it's like, oh no, should I do flashcards? Should I make an outline? Should I rewrite my notes? Just choose something and do it. Don't spend all this time worrying about it. Okay? If you make a mistake, that is a learning opportunity. Mistakes are not a negative. Mistakes are a learning opportunity. You are a student. This is the perfect time to make mistakes. Because as a student, you are expected to make mistakes. You are forgiven for making mistakes. Once you get out into the workforce, mistakes are much more serious, right? So this is a great time to make mistakes while you can. Of course, don't make the same mistake over and over, right? But make mistakes, learn from them, and move on. Know yourself. Know when you are most attentive. Are you a morning person? Are you a night person? When are you going to be able to study best? Only you know this. So try and work around yourself. Know how long you can concentrate. If you can only study for 30 minutes at a time, don't force yourself to study for 2 hours. Study 30 minutes, take a break. Another 30 minutes, take another break. Prioritize responsibilities. Use this to determine how much time to dedicate to each role. Okay? So, if you're living with someone, right, try and figure out who is going to take what responsibilities. That way, you know how much time then you will have left over for your studies. Same thing for your activities. And finally, plan for self-care. Do not neglect relaxation. Okay? You are in school. Yes. You have a responsibility to study. Yes. But that does not mean you cannot still have fun. That does not mean you cannot still relax. Just do it in moderation. Right? Dr. Black's favorite phrase is, right, something like, saw you guys at like the club last night, right? All over the weekend, right? Not studying at all. Well, that's okay. It's okay to take time off for yourself. Just do it in moderation. Please don't go to the club on a Sunday night, get dead drunk, and then show up to class on Monday with a hangover. That is not moderation. That is not planning ahead, right? But it is, do plan for self-care. And then, some other ways to handle stressors. exercise, nutrition, and meditation. Right? Exercise deals with that fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is a chemical reaction inside the body. Exercise or aerobic activity helps to dissipate these chemicals. See? But try to make sure this is a non-competitive activity. Otherwise, you may stress yourself out even more. Right? So just do it for fun, do it to relax, but don't challenge your most hated rival to a one-on-one game of basketball. Right? Because then your stress is going to jump through the roof. Okay? Try to perform aerobic exercises 3 to 5 times a week. Right? Keeps your body in shape, healthy mind, right? And helps to relieve some of that stress. Nutrition. Stress causes the loss of nutrients. You need to replenish it. You do not replenish nutrients by going to Taco Bell every day. Okay? That is actually an easy way to lose nutrients quickly. So, vitamin C, used for growth and repair of tissues, supports the immune system. Vitamin B improves energy. Magnesium supports the immune system. Right? You want to replenish these vitamins, and naturally, right? Don't just take one a day and call it a done deal. So try to avoid eating too many carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are sugars, so your body will get a sugar rush and then crash, which is commonly what happens immediately after lunch. You eat a whole bunch of carbs, you feel energetic during lunch, you walk into class, you sit down, and then you crash, right? So try and avoid too many carbs, too many sugars. Visualization and meditation. Visualization. Take some time, close your eyes, try and recall a pleasant experience for 10 to 15 seconds. Meditation, try and empty the mind and focus on a word, a statement, or just the act of breathing. Right? The idea here is to take your mind away from your stressors and put it into a more comfortable environment. Calm your mind down, and then come back, refocus, take a second look at what you were doing. Right? Get a new, fresh perspective, rather than your previous stressed out perspective. Okay. How are we doing so far? Okay? All right, just a little bit further. Okay, study tips. Review material after it is introduced. Use a variety of senses to study. Now, this does not mean to lick your book, right? That's not what I'm talking about. Right? When I say use a variety of senses, right? Don't just use vision and read your book, right? Or don't just use your hearing and listen to the lecture. You want to use your senses in combination, right? Sight, hearing, smell, taste, but touch, right? The act of writing, right? Having those senses work together helps a lot. In addition, being able to take material and connect it to a variety of senses helps a lot as well. Have a regular study schedule. I cannot stress this enough. It is important to study a little bit each day, because that will get you farther than studying a lot only in a single day, right? You want to be category 1. You do not want to be category 2. Right? A book a day keeps the cramming away. Study in a group. Form study groups. Get together with your classmates. Get a partner, or get several of you together and study together. Have one person try and teach the rest of the group. One person leading that study group. Right? Teaching is a great way to reinforce the material in your mind. Answering questions is a great way to reinforce material in your mind. And then keep a positive attitude. As soon as you think, I can't, you can't. But if you keep thinking that you can do it, you will be able to do it. Do not let self-doubt keep you from succeeding. keep a positive attitude. And so that brings us to this week's assignment, which was flashcards. Okay. So, why do I ask you to make flashcards? Because flashcards are great for studying. You can use them in a variety of ways. Keep each card as simple as possible. Do not write out an entire question and then 8 paragraphs on the back of your note card. You want one concept per card, a vocabulary word, or just some sort of concept, and on the back, a description. Avoid long sentences, avoid paragraphs. No one is going to read that, no one's going to study that, including yourselves. Okay? It will not stick. Keep it short, keep it simple, keep it sweet. Do not make too many cards at once. Focus on important information. Okay? So, don't try and study 100 note cards at one time. It will not help. Break it up into small bits, 10 at a time, 20 at a time. Okay? Try to handwrite your cards. Once again, applying all your senses. The act of thought, the act of writing does help. Typing is no substitute. Create multiple fill-in-the-blank cards for the same question. For example, blank discovered X-rays in 1895. Who was this? Röntgen, great. Next flashcard, Röntgen discovered X-rays in blank. 1895. Right? That way you can check yourself in terms of knowledge from various angles. Why is this important? Because I love this. This is great for exams. I can give you a review question that asks about one thing, and I can switch out what's missing and give it to you as a test question the next day. Right? That's something I love to do. So, doing something like this will help because it lets you look at a question from multiple angles. All right. Okay, we'll finish up with these two studying systems. So, something you can do with your flashcards now that you have them is called spaced repetition. This has been scientifically shown to improve your memorization and improve your recall, provided you follow this as closely as possible. The idea here is that you have different piles of note cards. Each pile is studied at a different rate. Some note cards you study every day. Some you study every 2 days. Some every 3 days. Some every week. Some about every 2 weeks. How does this work? You start with all your note cards here in box 1. The ones that you want to study every day. So, take out a note card. Look at it. Do you know what is on the note card? Check yourself. If you got the note card correct, you move it to the next box. So you move it down over here. If you get your note card incorrect, if you do not know the concept on that note card, you keep it in box 1. By the end of that first day, you will have 2 piles. Some note cards in box 1, some note cards in box 2. The next day, are you going to study all those note cards? No. That's right. You only study note cards that are still in box 1. Why? Because those were the ones you did not know. Those are the ones that you had trouble with. The ones that you did know, you do not need to study as often. Does that make sense? Don't waste your time studying things you already know. Spend time focusing on things you don't know. So the next day, you only study box 1. Do the same thing. Some go in box 2, some stay in box 1. On that third day, it is now time for you to start looking at box 2. Take them out. Do you still remember them? If you look at your note card and you still remember the concept, great. That now goes to box 3. You don't remember it? Put it back in box 1. Study it again. And as you go through this, eventually, note cards will begin trickling down here into box 5. These are the concepts that you know the best. You know them, you can remember them even after a week, so you do not need to look at them very often anymore. You can look at them every 2 weeks. You might even be able to look at them every month just to refresh yourself, and then you can put them to the side again. This way you focus all your attention on these here, which you know the least. Does that make sense? Yes, Jay.
So by the end of the month, you should have studied everything that's going from 1 to 5 at least twice, right?
Correct. So you can look this up online. There's a whole bunch of different instructions on how to set this up. There are even some programs out there which will help you automatically keep track of your note cards, or like electronic note cards. I believe one of them is called Anki, A-N-K-I. It's an electronic note card program. Okay, so you can set it up just like this to let yourself review these concepts every day. Second study technique, the Feynman technique. Explaining a complex subject to a 6-year-old. Right? Or not a 6-year-old, at least a middle schooler. If you are able to take a complex subject and break it down into simple parts that are so basic, you can explain it to a 6-year-old, you know that subject. Does that make sense? You know that subject when you can take it and break it down into the most basic, simple parts. So you need to learn how to explain things without relying on technical terms or jargon. Right? Instead of talking about IRs and CRs and collimators, you need to be able to take that and break it down into something more basic. Okay? Be able to break a topic down into its key individual components. You need to be able to filter out what is most important and what is less important for your explanation. Keep your explanation short and simple. A 6-year-old does not have a very long attention span. Even a middle schooler does not have a very long attention span. So keep your explanation simple and short. And finally, imagine that you're being followed up for every explanation you give with, but why? Right? Because kids love asking, but why? You try to explain to them, well, the sky is blue, but why? Well, you see the sunlight goes through these water droplets, but why? Well, you see, right? And as you go, you find yourself trying to break things down more and more and more, and that tests your understanding of the knowledge. Are you able to break it down in such a fashion that you can get to the very, very basics of it? Yes, Jay.
I was going to ask if you could show us an example, that which being the IR plate or whatever.
An example with the IR plate.
Like how would you describe it? This is a magic box that takes a picture, like something.
All right, so, using your PSP cassette as an example. All right, so the technical description for this is, inside here we have a PSP plate, which is a photostimulable luminescent phosphor plate. It captures X-rays. The X-rays cause electrons to jump up into the conduction band, which then get trapped and are only released by a laser, which then fluoresces, is captured by a photodetector, and is sent to the computer after passing through an analog to digital converter, which gives you your digital image.
This is for a PhD student.
Yeah,
Not for a 6-year-old.
that's your PhD student explanation, right? So
That's a hidden web bar.
now you need to start breaking it down, right? So you have X-rays. They're just these tiny particles of energy, right? You can't see them. They're visible, but they're there. And when they pass through, they reach this plate. Basically, it's just like a sheet of paper. When they hit this sheet of paper, they cause the paper to change in just a very subtle way. Inside this paper, there's something called an electron. The electron is just resting, it's just chilling out. But when the X-ray bumps into it, the electron gets shocked. It's like, whoa, what's going on? and it jumps up. But unlike a person who would jump up and then relax, this electron stays shocked. It doesn't relax. It stays trapped in its excited state. Much like when I give you candy and you stay trapped in an excited state. Right? So we now need a way to calm this electron down. So how do we do it? We go to a different machine and we shine some light on it. The light relaxes the electron and it drops back down. Right? When it relaxes, it gives off some energy. Just like when you relax, you give off a giant yawn. So we capture that yawn, that energy, and we are able to convert that into an image. Something like that. Cool. Right? And of course, now you would ask, but why does this happen? But why does that happen? But how does this happen? How does that happen, right? And you try and explain each thing as simply as possible, more and more and more, and that way you know that you know the subject. If at any point you get stuck and you're like, I'm actually not quite sure how that works, right? Then you know that is what you need to study. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It just kind of goes along with study groups, right? You try to explain a subject to your fellow classmates, and sometimes you hit a point where you're like, I actually don't know how to explain this. And that's where you know you need to study. So identify the subject, act like you're teaching it to a child, identify gaps in your knowledge, organize, simplify, tell a story. So, 2 study techniques. Right. Any questions? I know we went through a lot just now. Are we okay? Kind of?
So of the two, which one would you recommend first? Like try out first.
Both. Framing technique is something you can do really short term. You can just do in a short session. And then the linear method is going to be a more long-term solution. All right, so it is almost 2 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and stop here. If you were having trouble with ExamSoft or Exemplify, please stay after a little bit so I can try and work with you on that. For the rest of you, have a wonderful weekend. Please do not forget, right? Next week, there is no lab. You only have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Tuesday, Thursday, you do have off. Okay? Please bring your flashcards with you on Monday. I will check them on Monday. Okay?
The 1 through 4 class?
The 1 through 4 flashcards. Yes, Carl. Yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I knew I would forget. Appreciate that. One moment, please.
Did
One
we
moment.
touch chapter 4 now?
Is that?